let's play a fictional what-if scenario pitting the HMS Victory against USS Constitution and President. Of course, this never happened in real life because Nelson was dead, the Victory was under repair, and the President had just gotten captured. But for this scenario, we will live in an alternate reality where the Victory is still fully functional with Admiral Nelson still at its helm. The War of 1812 is raging more furiously than ever, and tired of fighting frigate-to-frigate battles, the Crown sends its first-rate ship. Hearing news of a first-rate off of the shores of Massachusetts, two ships spring into action. The USS President under the command of Stephen Decatur, and the venerable USS Constitution, Old Ironsides, under James Lawrence. In real life, these three iconic ships never had a chance to face each other. Stephen Decatur and James Lawrence have never fought someone to the pedigree of Admiral Lord Horatio Nelson. The Victory is a big, heavily armed first rate, while the President and Constitution are large, fast, and overgunned frigates. This epic battle will take place just off the coast of Massachusetts, with a lot of small islands and dangerous rocks blocking the way of these fighting ships. This will happen over the span of 10 turns. Who will be victorious? Stick around to see. On this faithful spring day on the year of our Lord 1814, the seas are very rough, making full use of sails impossible and shooting very hard. It is a little bit after noon when both parties spot each other's masts over the horizon. Suddenly, the wind shifts to a northeasterly direction, and now the Victory finds itself with a little bit of a headwind, and the Americans, sensing divine intervention at play, find themselves with a tailwind. The new weather gauge finds favor with the USS President, followed by the USS Constitution, and then across the way, the HMS Victory. So, play note, I forgot to remove this wreck. I actually rolled a 3 on turn 1. I should have removed it, so just ignore it. Stephen Decatur feels wind on his back and favor on his side. He orders his crew to action, and with superb skill, they take command of the sails and move it at battle sails forward. The ship pitches slightly starboard and then continues its forward surge towards the Victory. The British first rate is out of range, so for now, it'll have to wait. The crew of the USS Constitution race up the red lines to try to wrestle the sails in the rough seas. However, they were not successful, only able to get to light sails. Using whatever wind it has at its disposal, it is only able to move slightly forward and turning starboard to match its sister ship. For now, that is all the Constitution can do. Across the way lies the Victory. Admiral Nelson notices that the wind is not in his favor, so he does the best he can with his light sails. He pushes the ship forward and orders his helmsman hard starboard. He's going to try to get the wind in his favor the next time round. As the battle progresses, the wind does not change. The weather gauge continues to favor the Americans. They get to go first before the big British first rate. Captain Lawrence yells, "Put your back into it, men!" The crew of the Constitution wrestles the riggings and are able to get the sails to battle sails. With a strong tailwind on its back, the USS Constitution surges forward, fighting through huge swells in the ocean. It approaches jagged rocks, and Captain Lawrence makes an order to turn the ship port and narrowly misses running aground. Commodore Stephen Decatur continues to push his men forward, and the USS President continues on battle sails. The ship creaks and groans under the rough seas, heading closer towards its first-rate adversary. Commodore Decatur spots the first-rate off on the port side. "My God, she's big!" He orders the helmsman to turn port and orders the bow chaser guns to be at ready. "Fire at will!" The bow chasers let loose. The USS President is only lightly armed in the front, but it makes the shots count. The Americans strike first. Admiral Nelson is furious. "These Americans want a fight? Well, I'll give them a fight." Admiral Nelson barks his orders over the sound of crashing waves against the hull. The HMS Victory has a crack crew, and Admiral Nelson is the best that the British Navy has. But the seas were just too rough to handle. All the Victory could muster was light sails. Nevertheless, Nelson was determined to make the best of it. The Victory crept forward and started turning to starboard side, readying its broadsides for the next round. The weather gauge remained constant. The wind first hit the USS Constitution, followed by the USS President. Then, across the way, much later, it hit the Victory. With a stroke of bad luck, a huge ocean swell slammed against the Constitution, ripping its sails and slowing it down. Captain Lawrence's men wrestled against the ship, able to limp it forward, and carefully maneuvered around the dangerous rocks that surrounded it. Meanwhile, the USS President encountered misfortune of its own, as its mainsail tore away, limping it down to light sails. The HMS Victory was now out of gun range, and Commodore Decatur had to make sure he didn't run aground. Tempering his aggression, he reminded himself that there will be another opportunity. Admiral Lord Horatio Nelson skillfully managed his ship even through the rough waters. The HMS Victory mastered the waves with ease. The crew had served with Nelson for years, understanding his every whim and obeying his every order. They continued jockeying for position as the faster, more aggressive American ships approached. Horatio Nelson looked through his looking glass. The ships were too far. We just have to wait for them to get closer. The high winds continued to pound the ships from a northeasterly direction, with the weather gauge still heavily favoring the Americans. Eager to get engaged, both USS President and Constitution pushed their crews hard to get closer to the first rate. The USS President's swelling sails surged the ship ahead at full speed. Commodore Stephen Decatur sensed that a broadside was imminent. "Helmsman, 10 degrees starboard! Port side guns ready!" The British ship was just out of carronade range, but he couldn't wait. It wasn't the optimal shot, but it was time to fire. The gun crews had been waiting days for this, impressively well armed for a frigate. The port side batteries of heavy and light guns opened up in a steady staccato of smoke, fire, and cannonballs. The opening broadsides splintered wood and tore sails. The USS Constitution was eager to join in. However, its sails did not cooperate, keeping the ship at a painfully slow pace. There was no way to get a broadside, so Captain Lawrence instead pointed its bow towards the Victory. Armed with impressive heavy bow chasers, fuses were lit and the guns came to life. The Constitution's skilled sailors found their mark. But the elation was short-lived. The British first rate was barely scratched. Now it was the Victory's turn. With sea conditions that could easily cripple a lesser ship, was just scoffed at by Nelson and his crew. A wide smile beamed across the Admiral's face. This is exactly where he wanted them. He saw a chance for damaging raking fire, but judged against it. He would rather get his carronades into range instead. Nelson's patience paid off. Now it was time for the opening salvo. "Port side batteries, open fire!" The space between both warships filled with smoke and soot. Cannonballs flew at high speed, some hitting water, but most hitting hull, sail, and rigging. Old Ironsides, the nickname earned by the USS Constitution for its toughness. Its pine and oak hull had saved it before, but not this time. In one deadly barrage, the USS Constitution was almost crippled, its quarterdeck hit, crews dying, and officers mowed down. The venerable frigate never faced this type of adversity before. The northeasterly wind remained constant, and the weather gauge gave the American frigates the advantage. But both President and Constitution were beginning to wonder if this was too much of a fight to take on. The Constitution, nearly crippled from the last attack, worked feverishly to replace dead personnel and to keep the ship afloat. Whatever tattered sails remained drifted the ship forward, and is unable to do anything to fight back. Commodore Stephen Decatur frowned as he looked upon the USS Constitution. She was probably not going to be able to fight anymore, so it was up to the President to finish this. Commodore Decatur was looking for an opening, and suddenly he noticed it. The suddenly aggressive HMS Victory, in going after the Constitution, left its stern side wide open. With the port side battery fully primed again, Stephen Decatur gave the order. As determined as he was, Decatur could not bring all the port sight guns to bear. Only the heavy and lights were able to reach the Victory. The shots were on mark and smashed into the hull. The raking fire scorched the quarterdeck, but even then, the Victory remains unfazed. Cursing under his breath, Commodore Decatur turns port side, getting ready for the next salvo. The HMS Victory was determined to stay in battle sails. However, a freak accident knocked one of the crew overboard, and the sails dropped to light. "Onward, lads! Keep up the pressure!" With a hard turn of the wheel, the helmsman brings the Victory's port side to bear. The gun crews wheel the cannons into place. "Port side, fire!" Every port side, heavy, light, and carronade came alive. Plumes of smoke and fire blasted out of each barrel, blinding the combatants and slamming into the hull of the American frigate. The live Southern Oak was no match. The Constitution was devastated, but would it surrender? No! Captain James Lawrence was a stubborn fighter. He would follow this ship into its depths. A huge explosion rocked the top deck, and fire broke out. The fire quickly spread, burning men and wood alike. The day was starting to look grim for the Americans. The afternoon winds remained at a constant northeasterly direction, giving the weather gauge to the fiery Constitution, followed by the HMS Victory, and then finally the USS President. With the Constitution almost falling apart and in flames, the crew was in sheer panic. "All hands on deck!" cried Captain Lawrence. "Put the fire out! Save the ship!" Alas, the fire kept on raging, burning mast, sails, and wood. Nearly completely unmanned, the Constitution floated forward like a lifeless hulk, waiting for the inevitable. Admiral Nelson now had the advantage, but was up against a headwind. The Victory could only advance on light sails. "I want the Constitution underwater! Fire the stern guns!" The crew sponged, primed, and loaded the guns. But it found a hard part of the hull, and the cannonball just skipped off. The Constitution refuses to die. The rough seas continue being a bane for the USS President, again forced to drop to light sails. With its full speed all but cut off, all it could do is maneuver into position and try to come to the crippled Constitution's aid. As if by divine intervention, the wind suddenly shifts northerly. The winds start filling the sails of the USS President and gives the weather gauge back to the Americans. The first ship to react was the President, followed by the Constitution, and then the Victory. "All hands! Battle sails! Full forward!" The strong northerly wind fills the President's sails, pushing it ahead in pursuit of the Victory. "Helmsman, hard port! Bow chasers, at ready!" The forward-facing guns wheel into position, and with the lighting of the fuse, the cannons open fire. The shots hit, but simply grazed the first rate. Undeterred, Commodore Decatur uses the President's newfound speed to push it ahead and turn hard starboard to bring the portside guns to bear once again. This time, the heavy, light, and carronades were all able to open fire. The deadly volley shattered the deck and smashed riggings. Somewhere on the lower deck, a keg of gunpowder explodes. Fire started spreading. Meanwhile, the Constitution continued to battle its flames and finally was able to put the fire out. Largely unmanned, it slowly sailed towards the eastern horizon. As the fire continued to rage on the Victory, Admiral Nelson barked sharp orders at his men. "Remember where you're from, for king and country!" The crew responds to his orders, and in minutes the fire is put out. "Stay on light sails! I want that Constitution!" Tasting blood in the water, Admiral Nelson orders the stern cannons to open fire. But the huge waves made it difficult, and all the shots found water. The northerly wind persists, giving the weather gauge to the Americans once again, starting with the Constitution, then the President, and finally the HMS Victory. With the Constitution's skeletal crew, all they can muster is light sails, and the only option remaining is an indignant escape. It is almost home free, but not quite yet. Stephen Decatur's USS President remains defiant. It wants to avenge what had been done to the USS Constitution. Fighting against the roiling seas with only light sails, the President pulls out all the stops to get out one more broadsides on the Victory. The heavy and light guns light up. Decatur knows it won't do much, but he will not end this without a fight. A cannonball rips through the Victory's superstructure, but the mighty warship shrugged this off without any problems. Frustrated at not being able to sink or capture his adversaries, Admiral Nelson orders battle sails to give chase. He whips out his looking glass and looks astern, and is pleased to see that the Constitution is still within range. The keen marksmanship of the HMS Victory finds its mark. But to their chagrin, the shot bounced off the hull yet again. When it counted most, Old Ironsides came true. Dejected, the British ship turns portside. With whatever's left in its sails, the HMS Victory pulls away to avoid the President's broadside. Sensing that the day is lost, the Americans look to head back to Chesapeake Bay. As the day moves to afternoon and the winds continue blowing northerly, the weather gauge gives the American frigates the reprieve that they need. With the wind hitting the USS Constitution first, it fades into the east, barely seaworthy, but nonetheless alive. The President would have the last say. The portside batteries come alive again as a parting shot to the Victory. And again, the mighty flagship just laughs it off. Spitting out a curse, Commodore Stephen Decatur exits to the north. Admiral Nelson and the HMS Victory are victorious. I really hope you enjoyed this fictional what-if battle, and if you enjoyed this, please join me in future videos. I hope to see you soon.